From the heart of the city too busy to hate. A progressive voice making too much sense for corporate media's comfort. This is The Ron Show, where we the people come first. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
All right, later in the show, we will chat with Quentin Pullen, Coach Q. He's running for a state House District seat here in Metro Atlanta, actually, just south of Atlanta, Georgia. So that's good fodder for a little bit later in the show. We also want to talk a little bit about Georgia Republicans looking to get rid of the state income tax, meaning that money's got to come from somewhere else, meaning it's going to come from you and I making purchases, which means it's going to affect the working class and the poor a lot more. The Georgia Budget and Policy Institute has gone over that. We had a conversation about that already. They released a little bit of their details, not the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute, the Georgia Republican Senate. And the GBPI seems to be very much on task with the conversation we had. So we'll revisit that conversation. First things first, we've got headlines, all hell breaking loose in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which of course has been a tinderbox, not just in the civil rights era. We think back to George Floyd, but not far from where George Floyd was killed. We have another dead individual, this time at the hands of what seems to be ICE agents. Joining me from Minnesota, actually, to give us some firsthand reporting on the scene there, from the TikTok account Off Jawagon. Jordan, tell me what's going on here. We've seen the video. It's like the Zapruder film all over again. We're seeing videos of angles and this, that, and the other. It appears this, well, first of all, let me get to what Kristi Noem said, DHS Secretary. She alluded to this on Fox News and said that an ICE vehicle had been stuck in the snow, and while they were trying to get pushed out, they were ambushed by protesters or this, that, and the other. That doesn't seem to bear fruit when you're looking at the video. What are you hearing?
No, I mean, it's an outright lie. We haven't had snow here in well over a week. There's no snow on the roads and the streets of Minneapolis right now, anywhere in the state. It's utter bullshit. And then you can see clear as day in the video that the road is clear. You can see blacktop. You can see that this woman, the way that her car was angled, it looked like she was either trying to observe the situation as a constitutional observer or turned her car around to get away from the illegally blocked road by ICE, the people that were on the road in her community. And obviously when she was approached by masked armed men being very aggressive, she tried to remove herself from that situation, and they murdered her. There's no two ways around that. They tried to claim that she tried to ram them. Now they're changing their story from the ambush because there was clearly no ambush. I mean, the streets were sparsely populated. Mm-hmm. No one was attacking officers in that situation. And you could see that the officer who shot her, by the time he fired the first shot, was completely clear of the car. You can see clear as day that there's daylight between his leg and the fender. This is murder conducted by a domestic terror organization that is state-sponsored at this point. Have
they announced the name of the victim by chance? Do we know if this is just an observer, or if this was somebody who may have been targeted by ICE themselves or an activist? Do we know this yet?
We do not know the name of the victim yet. We know that she was a woman. I have it on authority from my people on the ground there that she appeared to be white, not an immigrant. This was not part of an immigration enforcement thing. And this is what we need to remember, too, is that immigration officers have no authority to detain anybody without probable cause, or even with probable cause, unless they can identify them as somebody involved in some sort of immigration operation. They had no reason to stop this woman. She was not violating any laws by not complying with their requests. They are not police officers who have any authority to detain U.S. citizens.
We don't even know to what level of experience the agents in this scenario have. I mean, they may have been signed up, in recent months and have limited experience at any sort of conflict resolution whatsoever. I mean, this is the sort of thing that we're concerned about with police officers who only get 12, 16 weeks of training in police academy and don't really get a full, thorough vetting of de-escalation tactics. Well, we certainly don't see this happening with ICE agents. I mean, we've seen videos of protesters, say in North Carolina, where they banded about and realized that if they honk horns and let folks nearby know that ICE is in the area, that somehow sends folks scurrying. Well, a woman was literally pulled out of her vehicle by an ICE agent after having her window bashed in by that same ICE agent just for honking her horn, which I would think is a First Amendment right. But here we are again. Now, this time we have a dead body, which doesn't appear to be an immigrant, doesn't appear to be a criminal, just someone who is being an activist and watching what ICE is doing, which is completely within our rights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And this is really where, when we talk about de-escalation, we have no idea what kind of training ICE agents are getting, as you stated. But clearly, they were not looking to de-escalate the situation. The person was screaming obscenities, using the F word, telling her to get the F out of the car. That's not something that a law enforcement officer, that's not the kind of language they should be engaging in when trying to de-escalate a situation and talk to somebody. And this woman, I mean, obviously it was a woman in a car that at the time was not pointed at any agents. So there's no reason to be, escalating a situation to the point of lethal force or any force, really. I mean, so every narrative that they're coming out with right now just does not hold water from any angle. And this is really tragic. But this, I have a feeling, is going to be a bigger issue than George Floyd. We're planning a mass protest tomorrow, 7:30 in the morning at the Whipple building, the Whipple Federal building in Minneapolis. And I hear that there's going to be protests nationwide. This is a very big deal. This is clear-cut murder, and the fact that this officer, don't even want to call him an officer, this terrorist is not in cuffs in a jail cell right now is an affront to justice. And the fact that we do not have state police and the National Guard out there arresting all of these agents who are clearly a threat to public safety, a very present threat to public safety, is outrageous.
That does remind me, by the way, Governor Tim Walz did tweet earlier not to buy into the propaganda, he called it, when he shared a video, I guess a tweet from the Department of Homeland Security about this situation. Minnesota has obviously been a focal point for everyone here in the United States for the last couple of weeks. He announcing he's not going to run for his third term. I guess let's transition to that just a little bit. What was your reaction when he decided that he just wasn't going to run for that third term?
My reaction was, it was heartbreak. It was frustration. It was anger. I can't blame him for doing this. I don't say I know the governor personally. I have spent some time with the governor, spoken with him, his daughter, his wife, and they're truly lovely people. And I know the threats and harassment and bullying that they've been getting. And it's not like it's the regular threats that you get just being a politician. This is very real for us here in Minnesota when Melissa Hortman, a dear friend and colleague of his, her husband, their dog were murdered in their own home by a masked person pretending to be an officer, So, I understand why, for his family's mental health and safety, he stepped back from the race. But that gave, MAGA and this Nick Shirley person a big win, even though all of that was fraudulent and completely untrue. It was a hit piece, propaganda piece. And now that he's stepping back, it's frustrating because we're a month away from caucuses, less than a year away from the election, and we don't really know how this is going to play out. And we thought we had our guy, and now we've got to deal with that, along with obviously everything else, this constant onslaught of federal attacks and 2,000 new ICE troops rolling into our streets.
I remember when he made the announcement, I kind of postscripted my episode a couple of days ago and mentioned that we need people like Tim Walz in politics instead of running them off. And that so, like I said, as you mentioned, the harassment has been otherworldly for he and his family. Obviously, we all remember, how goosebumpy and tear-inducing it was when we saw his son Gus celebrating his speech at the DNC, and now you've got jackasses outside his home yelling the R word on the hourly for long periods of time. I can understand.
I want to make clear, when they're doing that too, he has a verbally disabled, learning disabled child. So Gus, that's very personal to him. Not just because he's a decent human who doesn't think that we should use ableist slurs, but he has a son that those ableist slurs are directed at, and that's not okay.
Yeah. We've just seen the worst come out in people in these last 10 years. It's so unfortunate. I remember when Tim Walz was announced as Kamala Harris's running mate, I thought, Wow, what a refreshing choice. This is the kind of human being, this is the family, the kind of people we need to see in politics. And again, I'm as disappointed as you are. I also understand, unfortunately, and this is why good people don't run for office. Tell me a little bit more, if you will, about the situation here. Let's get back to the shooting death. I was reading from Politico. The Immigration Defense Network is a coalition of groups that serves the immigrant community in Minnesota, and they've been holding training sessions for a while about this. They're preparing for this influx of ICE agents and DHS raids on the immigrant community there.
Yeah, we've actually had groups, individual, indivisible groups as well, all around the state, even in rural communities, holding these ICE training events, passing out ICE whistle kits, and then assembling ICE whistle kits. And it's been really inspiring just to see how Minnesotans come together on this. And we've seen this before. Obviously, we saw it with George Floyd. And, you can go all the way back to the Civil War. Minnesota stands up for what we believe in, with Minnesota's first volunteer. And it's something that's really, truly part of the culture up here. And I think that this was the wrong place for ICE to make this kind of mistake, because it will not be taken lightly. And we have been preparing as an entire community, and we are coming together as an entire community. On top of that, I have people flying in, other creators flying in from around the country to be here tomorrow at the drop of a dime, to be here from Indiana, Arkansas, Missouri, Wisconsin, California. So it's going to be a very national thing. This is going to be big. And I think that this is our catalyst moment to really take our power back as citizens from this tragedy, because we can't let this happen again. We can't afford to forget and allow them to flood the zone and distract us from this. This is our moment. This
presidency has been exhausting, and we're just 1 year. I remember when we were just worrying about not a plane, but a balloon flying over our heads for a few days. Remember how calming even that was? I mean, I just look back to that now, and I think how nostalgic the Biden presidency was in its calmness, I guess.
Yeah, it would be lovely if we could go a single day without a once-in-a-lifetime event or a crisis of some sort. And yeah, give us Chinese weather balloons flying overhead any day. I'd take that over this hellscape that we've gotten ourselves into.
And here's the thing: like I want you to hear this, and I want you to pass this on to anybody else who's coming into Minneapolis to join in the activism. I mean, I support it 1,000%. But you got to keep in mind as well that there are, every possibility you could have some jackass from Waukesha, show up to, stir up trouble and wreak havoc and cause bloodshed himself or herself and become the next, Kyle Rittenhouse. So please stay safe, stay vigilant, stay loud, stay vocal, and, just keep your eyes and ears peeled to make sure that, everything's on the up and up. We appreciate you guys doing the activism and also the reporting. The reporting is so important. It's 2026. I have to say that now. I have to catch myself. But it's 2026, and like social media catches like wildfire. And as long as we're able to continue to get the word out, they can't suppress what's actually happening.
Absolutely. This was incredible. I mean, I heard about this before the news had even reported on it, and we were getting it, in real time. I don't do breaking news, but I did breaking news today for this because it was that important. And I think that getting this out there and making sure that they're not allowed to twist this narrative into making themselves the victim when they clearly just committed cold-blooded, unjustified murder in the street in broad daylight in front of dozens of witnesses. And if they can do that now, they will do it again if they are not held accountable. So we need to do that. But absolutely, you are correct. Make sure that everybody who's coming in, do not be a martyr. We don't need more people in body bags, You can fight harder when you're still breathing. Make sure that you have a lawyer lined up.
Yes.
Make sure that you have a few emergency numbers memorized if they take your phone. Take your biometric locks off your phones when you are participating in this activism. Just be safe, be smart, be loud, but keep yourself safe. We need everybody in this fight.
Yes, sir. All right. He's off to wagon on TikTok. Jordan, thanks for joining me for the update. I appreciate that.
No, thank you so much for having me.
You're listening to The Ron Show on Georgia Now, Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution's Greg Bluestein, David Wickard reporting that a tax policy committee formed by Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, who again made that a central part of his gubernatorial campaign to eliminate the state income tax. Anyway, it's recommending one of the most far-reaching overhauls of Georgia's income tax systems in decades, a plan that would eliminate state income taxes entirely for about two-thirds of Georgia workers beginning in 2027 and sharply reduce the burden for everybody else. Bluestein and Wickett reporting that the proposal outlined by State Senate Appropriations Chair Blake Tillery on Tuesday to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution calls for making the first $50,000 of income for individual filers tax-free. Okay. Married couples filing jointly would pay no state income tax on their first $100,000 of income. The plan envisions gradually lowering and eventually eliminating state income taxes on remaining taxpayers and businesses over time. The report also emphasizes what the plan would not do. It says here that it would not raise the state sales tax, create a statewide property tax, or mandate deep cuts to state services. Instead, Republicans backing the effort say economic growth and conservative fiscal adjustments, well, that's a gray, can sustain the cuts. Jones launched the committee last summer to study ways to eliminate the income tax. The committee is set to meet Wednesday to formally review and adopt its report, that being today. More reporting on that by tomorrow, I'm certain. I look forward to building on the committee's valuable findings and commit to work with all members of the General Assembly on crafting a solution that responsibly delivers on my promise to let workers keep more of what they earn, Burt Jones said in a statement yesterday. The plan sets up a direct confrontation with Republican leaders in the Georgia House who would rather back deeper cuts to property taxes. We'll talk more about that later in the show. Then eliminate the income tax, which is by far the largest source of state revenue, accounting for about $15.7 billion this year. Let me reread that so that you know where that line is going. Direct confrontation with Republican leaders in the Georgia House who would rather back deeper cuts to property taxes than eliminate the income tax being the largest source of state revenue, accounting for $15.7 billion this year. And it sharpens a rift in the race for Georgia governor, where Jones faces two GOP rivals with contrasting tax policy views. Can I just also discuss the property tax thing? Property tax cuts are fantastic if there's a guarantee, by the way, that landlords, property owners who rent, are going to at least share some of those savings. Like, is there a guarantee that rent's going to come down when the property tax comes down too? Can we bake that into any legislation at least? Democrats, I'm talking to you, not the Republicans, because they're going to craft the bill, but you can at least insist that that language be written into the bill as well. I mean, by all means, try to fight as much as you can, but at the very least, include some verbiage in this legislation or insist that it be put in there so that those who don't own property can somehow benefit if those tax cuts do come to fruition. Back to Greg Bluestein, David Wickard reporting in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. The recommendation also raises key questions, including how the state would make up billions in foregone revenue over time, whether the economy could keep pace with the loss, and how the shift would affect school funding, healthcare programs, and future budgets. Remember, Georgia's a balanced budget state. Like, it's all got to balance out. The money coming in's got to balance the money going out. And if you're cutting up to $15.7 billion of revenue, and also saying, I'm not going to raise property taxes, I'm not going to raise state sales taxes, what do you have left? I mean, deer hunting licenses and tag fees and all that stuff, you can't do that, right? But again, that comes back on the working class. Back to the AJC. Democrats have argued the windfall would tilt toward wealthier taxpayers and strain government services. Well, yeah. Fiscal watchdogs will want details about revenue projections and safeguards if the economy slows. One of the unknowns revolves around Governor Brian Kemp. He's backed a gradual reduction of the income tax, which now sits at 5.19%, but he hasn't indicated whether he'd support a broader push to eliminate it. Jones, Tillery, and their allies say the goal is to put more money in Georgians' pockets at a time when inflation, housing costs, and insurance spikes are straining budgets, and candidates are increasingly focused on affordability. There's $14 billion in the state tax coffers via surplus. I mean, you could divvy that out amongst all the families, and it would be a nice chunk of money, but it wouldn't be life-altering or game-changing. It wouldn't overcome cost spikes due to tariffs and inflation over the last 6 years. Anyway, Tillery said the plan's first year would already be funded. He pointed to about $1.8 billion in surplus revenue last year and another $1 billion created by moving state spending from cash to bonds. Starting in year 2, Tillery said lawmakers would begin trimming special interest tax credits, which total about $30 billion on the books by about 10%. What are these special interest tax credits, though? Are we targeting things like the film industry? Are we targeting? Listen, handouts to big business. To me, I'm dead set against anyway. I could get on board with reducing state income tax if we're talking about stop letting us dole out billions in tax incentives for big business to skirt the sort of costs that small businesses don't get the benefit of. We'll talk, by the way, with Quentin Pullen running for State House District 68 about that. About what's in it for small business. What's in it, period, for small business when it comes to incentivization. Back to the AJC. Under the plan, a married couple earning $100,000 or more would save about $5,190 in state income taxes. By the way, that $5,190 breaks out to about $430 a month. Tell me what happened to your health insurance coverage, family of 4. Anyway, Daniel Canso from the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute conversed with me about this last November. We'll revisit that conversation when the Ron Show returns. What you're about to hear is a replay of an interview I did with Dr. Daniel Canso from the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute back in late November of 2025. The reason I think it's still relevant to play it today is because not much of the information that came out yesterday from Georgia Senate Republicans yesterday and later today is because nothing new really came out of the wash. I'll tell you what Dr. Canso's statement earlier today read. Although the proposal makes no specific recommendations for how Georgia would replace half of its general fund revenues, it makes clear that 74% of all benefits, estimated at $11.49 billion annually, would go to households earning 6 figures or more per year. The committee's lack of specific recommendations to replace Georgia's largest revenue source speaks volumes and points towards the most likely outcome anyway, increasing Georgia's sales tax and raising the cost of living. While most Georgians would see an average net tax increase of about $1,000 per year if the state shifts to a sales tax-based revenue system, those in the top 1% earning more than $35,000 per year would see average tax cuts of about $60,000 per year. You think that's just coincidental? I don't. I don't think Dr. Daniel Canso does either. Anyway, here's that conversation from late November with Dr. Daniel Canso from the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute.
Broadcasting 5 days a week to make common sense common again. This is The Ron Show.
So, nearly almost the minute that Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones decided he was going to run for governor in the state of Georgia, he announced that his central policy position, fiscally speaking, would be to eliminate the state income tax. This from his campaign rollout video.
Number one, we're going to completely eliminate the state income tax. Tennessee and Florida have done it, and I'll get it done for Georgia.
Yeah, the problem with that, Florida and Tennessee have some ways of generating revenue that Georgia doesn't, namely tourism. Dr. Daniel Canso. Dr. Danny from the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute joins us. Your organization and you in particular put out a report that seems to be pretty damning to the idea of Georgia eliminating the state income tax. And the numbers are there for anyone to see. And yet Georgia Republicans are bullish. They were holding meetings. They're going to come back with findings in December. I guess between now and then, this is a little bit like waiting for the GOP response for the Affordable Care Act. Are we going to see something you think that makes any sense whatsoever?
It's good to be with you, Ron. First, I'll just say for the record, we are a nonpartisan, nonprofit research and policy organization.
Right.
So we're not coming at this from a political perspective, but we are analyzing the numbers here. And the income tax is and has been for over 4 decades Georgia's largest source of revenue, our primary source of revenue. Right now, if you add the corporate income tax, which is about $3.3 billion, with the personal income tax, which is about $16.2 billion, you get $19.5 billion, which is about 56% of every dollar that the state of Georgia raises and spends. So really, when we look at that, and when we look at, okay, what are the exemptions if you're going to do away with at least the personal income tax, at least $16 billion, and the next largest source of revenue is the sales tax, which brings in a little over $9 billion a year. So essentially, you'd have to triple those revenues to be able to come up with the same amount of money that we generate from the income tax. Because really, I haven't heard any of the proponents of this saying we are going to cut the budget, which also in Georgia, being one of the lowest spending states in the country, primarily means that you're cutting healthcare and education.
Right.
So that really hasn't been part of the talking point. So we have to assume we're just going to raise that money through other taxes. And that means basically that regular people would see the cost of living go up every day, every week, every month. The things that you buy, the things that you need to live get more expensive. And you really don't save very much from getting rid of the income tax, because we have things like the standard deduction, where if you're an individual, you don't start paying taxes until after $12,000. If you're married, it's $24,000. If you have kids, you get a $4,000 exemption for each of them. And so that's why when we look across the state and we say, is the state income tax actually a problem? For most people, it's 3% or less of what they're actually earning. And actually, for most people in state and local sales taxes right now, they're paying a higher share already of what they earn. So if you can imagine that we're just going to increase those, the result is that a relatively few people get a massive tax cut, and most people get a pretty large tax increase, averaging about $1,000 a year for the first 80% of people who make up to about $153,000. So I know that's a lot, but basically that is kind of the layout here.
Here's what I love about your report, by the way, and kudos to anybody who made this decision. Lots of graphs, lots of colors. Even a simpleton like me can understand this. I'm sitting here looking at the graph that shows who pays, the major sources of revenue by household impact. Georgia already has something of a regressive tax policy combination in place when you look at the lowest 20% of income earners. 10.3% from them, 10.1% from the second 20%, 9.6% from the third 20%. The higher up you go, the numbers start shrinking. And they really start shrinking precipitously from those who earn nearly $500,000 a year or more on up. It dips to 8% and then to 6.9%. And it sounds to me like eliminating the state income tax is only going to exacerbate that, putting more of the burden on the hardest working, the lowest wage earners, and honestly, the working poor.
And I hope people look at this, because this is what I was talking about, and I think makes these numbers make a lot of sense. So we're talking about income groups, basically. So the first 20% of people, they make on average about $15,000 a year. There are about 1 million households that fall into that group, and so on. 1 million in the second, 1 million in the third, about 5 million households in Georgia, because people file their taxes together, right? With their families, with their children. So that's the pool that we're talking about here. So when we look at that first 20%, on average right now, they pay about 10.3% of every dollar they earn in state and local taxes.
Gotcha.
Right. So, and for them, sales taxes right now are about 6% of every dollar they earn. And you can imagine that's because you are paying to live, I mean, you're spending most of what you have, to get by from paycheck to paycheck, really. Yeah. And then you look at property taxes are about 3.5% of that 10.3%, because everyone pays property taxes if you have a home, whether you rent or own. They're just passed on to you if you rent as part of the package. Obviously insurance, mortgage, and property taxes. So. And then if we go on, basically 95% of Georgians pay between 9 and 10% of what they earn in taxes. But what you see is sales taxes become a slightly smaller share. Not all that small of a share, by the way. I mean, when you get to the 80% of Georgians, those kind of making the low six figures, on average about $113,000. If we look at the same numbers for them, they're paying about 9.8% of what they earn. They're paying an equal share of that, though, split between personal income taxes and sales taxes. So, when people talk about this, often they say, well, if we substitute sales taxes, it's going to hurt the poor. And obviously it will hurt the poor, but it will also hurt the middle class. I mean, it will hurt almost everybody. Because, whether you do this by broadening the base, as they say, which, very quickly you'll run out of things because the largest exemptions are things like groceries, manufacturing, which really gets taxed on the final product, not in between, construction, healthcare, prescription drugs, things that you really wouldn't want to tax. And that's the reason that we don't. There are a few tax breaks in there, obviously, that we could agree should be eliminated. Things like data centers, the film tax break, is one that we're very generous with. But those are nowhere close to $16 or $19 billion. And when we look at where other states without income taxes are getting revenue, almost universally, aside from those with oil or minerals, the answer is the sales tax. And really what we've heard in terms of presentations before this committee, the folks who did, mention what we might substitute this with, it's overwhelmingly the sales tax. And so that's why really you need to be making at least in the six figures, but more likely, the people who are really getting kind of the massive noticeable tax cuts would be $500,000 and up. And then, when you get into the top 1%, if you're averaging about $2.1 million in income, kind of your net between those sales taxes and the income tax you're getting would be almost $60,000. So if you imagine you're giving about 50,000 of these, top income households an average tax cut of about $60,000 a year, someone has to pay for that. A lot of people have to pay for that because the number is so big.
This is something of a case study in the push and pull, the tug of war. There's always, especially amongst libertarians and conservatives, this push for, just a full-on consumption tax, eliminating the income tax. And here we have, again, a case study that kind of shows that this does not work for everyone. This is not necessarily what they misnomer a fair tax system. Also, the timing seems to be, pardon my French, piss poor right now, with inflation being what it is, costs continuing to rise in the post-COVID economy. This seems like really poor timing to even have this discussion. But is there ever a good time for this to actually bear out and be, air quotes, fair?
Well, this obviously isn't a new idea.
Right.
Although Alaska is really the only state with an income tax that looked like Georgia that's ever eliminated it. And that was because they struck oil.
Right.
And in recent years, they've added corporate income taxes and other things because oil is a really unstable source of revenue. 1 year it's very valuable. A year like last year, it plummeted hugely and they raised a lot less revenue. So there's but oil is an exception. These other states, they built their revenue systems without income taxes. And what we also don't hear is that Georgia has very low taxes already. We're the 7th lowest out of 50 per person in overall taxes that we pay, and we're the 8th lowest out of 11 in the South, and lower than all of our neighbors aside from Florida, which is obviously a very unique state in terms of having a much older population, also having, many, many more miles of coastline than Georgia and being, completely different economically. But we are paying much lower taxes than folks in North Carolina, for example. On average, per person, they're paying about 18% more than $500 a year, more than Georgians. Same thing in Tennessee. They're paying more than 11% more than Georgians. South Carolina, very similar. And so we hear this idea that somehow eliminating the income tax is going to make us more competitive. But actually, when we dig into the numbers, we see that Georgia's economy is outperforming most of these states without income taxes already. We have a higher median income than states like Florida or Tennessee. We outperform in productivity recently than most of these states. We have the highest bond rating, a AAA bond rating that lets us borrow at a lower cost. So, really, I haven't heard any good answers to why we would abandon kind of the cornerstone of our economic system to pursue what would seem to be, extremely risky. If you imagine a business or an individual or anyone saying, I currently generate, 56% of my revenues from this one source, and it's been my largest source of income since 1982, my most stable. I'm going to abandon that and I'm going to go to something else when I don't even have any kind of economic study or anything that suggests that that would be a positive return. And when I look at the states that have systems that way, that we're already outperforming them, it just doesn't make very much sense, obviously. And still, we haven't heard kind of a full explanation of what we're going to replace this source of revenue with, which makes sense because all of the options are very painful and costly. And so, that is what we're waiting for. And so without that, we kind of did our best and just looked at what these other states do and said, we're going to, look at the sales tax here because that's where most of these states get north of 75% of their revenue. If we look at the most commonly cited examples like Tennessee and Florida and Texas. And obviously that's not a very pretty picture.
We're on with Dr. Daniel Canso, Director of Legislative Strategy, Senior Fiscal Analyst at the Georgia Budget Policy Institute. More of the scintillating conversation with Dr. Danny when the Ron Show returns on Georgia Now, Progressive Voice via TuneIn and wherever you podcast. I should mention, by the way, that the Georgia Budget Policy Institute will host a webinar Thursday at 2 o'clock to deliver an overview of the potential effects of eliminating Georgia's income tax and further commentary on report from the Senate Special Committee on the elimination of Georgia's income tax. I'll make sure that link is included in the show notes today at ronshowatl.com. My conversation continues from Dr. Daniel Canso of the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute, Senior Fiscal Analyst there. From last November, this was our conversation. Is it a messaging issue? Is it just easy to talk cut income taxes? This happens at the federal level. It's seemingly happening at the state level. And there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of pushback because it just sounds like such a popular thing. So what is it that politicians who want to counter this, what is it that they need to point out?
Well, again, in Georgia, this has really been an issue at the margins. Historically, there's been pretty broad consensus that eliminating the income tax is not a good idea and would in fact be a tax increase for a majority of Georgians. So the status quo here is not that there is this big push to eliminate the income tax. And in fact, when we look at survey research about Georgians, what is the biggest issue facing you right now? Overwhelmingly, the cost of living is at the top of the list. And when we look at really what this is a proposal to increase the cost of living for most people to pay for a massive tax cut for those at the very top and large corporations. For most people, that's not a very attractive proposition. They don't want sales taxes to go up on everything that they buy and to lose money so that somebody else can get a massive tax cut. When we just look at how these states are doing, I haven't heard sometimes people bring up, Mississippi, Tennessee, Texas, Florida. A lot of these states are performing a lot worse than Georgia, where we have a median income of about $80,000 a year. In Tennessee, that's much lower. In Florida as well, they have lower per capita income. If we look at recent economic growth, Georgia is performing very strongly. We've grown in population. So it's sort of like, why would we tear down the cornerstone of our state revenue system to take a very risky proposition that really isn't going to benefit very many people at all? And that's why usually this issue as a talking point sounds very good. And then when you ask, okay, how are we going to pay for it? What are we going to replace it with? Which is at the stage of the conversation that we're at right now. Remember, none of these proposals have specific ways that we're going to do that. But then you start to see all of the tax increases that people are going to get, and it becomes much more real. Are we going to start paying taxes on prescription drugs, on groceries? Are you going to make the cost of building a home more expensive? Where are you going to go? Because really, there are not a lot of easy answers to raise $16 billion or $19 billion a year in a state that already has extremely low taxes otherwise.
The state has a $14 billion surplus, so certainly there seems to be some room or some wiggle room to cut taxes. What is your response to that?
Well, if you think about this, what that would be saying is that we are going to pay for a recurring revenue loss, a revenue loss that's going to keep happening with one-time money. That might work for the first few years, but what happens when that account ticks down to zero? And the reason that we have a large share of those surpluses is in the event of a recession or an economic downturn, people lose their jobs, people make less money, people spend less money, the state collects less revenue. So if we want to keep public education steady, if we want to keep healthcare steady, when people are going to rely most on those services, that's part of the reason why we keep reserves and don't just spend them down. What that is advocating for is a budget that's not balanced, which in Georgia, by the way, is a constitutional requirement.
Right. All right. What sort of tax policy would benefit most, if not all, Georgians going into the fiscal year 2026?
So that's a great question. And I think to answer that, you look back on what are recent policies that have gotten kind of the most traction and the most attention. And usually those policies are things that have a set amount. So for example, last year, lawmakers created a child tax credit that's actually going to start in January that's $250 per child. So the reason that makes a lot of sense is because you get the same amount for your child, whether you make $30,000 a year or $200,000 a year. And if you were to say, okay, I want to give a tax cut or something like that of at least a couple $100, it's extremely difficult to do that through cutting the income tax rate, because when we look at the distribution there, you're just going to give much, much larger tax cuts to those at the very top. For example, when we look at reducing from where we are right now to 4.99%, that is a cost of almost $800 million, and about 70% of those benefits would go to those at the very top, making over $153,000 a year, the top 20%. And if we look at the median tax cut for your middle income Georgian, on average, it would be less than $75 over a full year. So that's a really kind of costly proposal. $800 million is a lot of money. And still, most people would not notice that very much. So when you cut the income tax rate from the top down, whether you go down to zero or whether you go down from where we are at 5.19, that's basically the most costly and least efficient way to target things. If you do something like saying, we're going to create a child tax credit, that is something where you can target the full amount. And that's why when they've done these kind of surplus rebates, although, that's something that folks could argue, are there better uses of funds? But they say it's a flat amount. It's either, $250 or $500 that we're giving folks. Same thing with what they do on the property tax. So the reason they kind of apply that amount is because that is the way that you target lower and middle income people who are the majority of Georgians. You have standard deduction that you can do that with as well, where obviously almost 90% of the state uses that to lower what they're actually paying in taxes. But then right now, again, we're collecting the seventh lowest level of taxes in America.
Right.
So, that naturally means that we are also one of the lowest spending states. So there are things that we could increase. You look at things like the tobacco tax, we're 49th out of 50 there. And so to get investments, in healthcare, we have the second highest rate of uninsurance in America.
Right.
We have childcare costs us billions of dollars economically every year because outside of pre-K, we're really doing very little to help folks. And that is a huge economic return. If we look at, and that's a public policy question that folks all across the country are trying to address, and something that has real promise because intuitively, it makes sense to anybody. Parents are struggling to be able to work and raise a family. And the cost of living, we know is a real problem for most people. Things that are targeted to address that are going to have a high return. And at some point, I think it's okay to say, our taxes are very low. Maybe we've accomplished that, but also we're not performing very well in healthcare. We have a long way to go in education, and we have some big problems that really we're only scratching the surface and starting to address, like childcare.
Again, that was a conversation that I had late last November with Dr. Daniel Canso from the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute. We're only starting to get drips and drabs of information about where this revenue shortfall would be dealt with, eliminating some some state tax credits that seem to, we would hope, be what the state has been using to bring business or lure business. Tax cuts or tax incentives that benefit big business, fine, that's on the table. But they're also talking about using the state's $14 billion surplus for year one. We'll have more of that conversation in the coming days. Thank you so much for listening to The Ron Show on Georgia Now. Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. Weekdays 4 to 6 p.m. on Georgia Now. Replaying 8 to 10 a.m. the following day, 11 p.m. at Progressive Voices via TuneIn. Show notes at ronshowatl.com. Coach Q, Quentin Pullen, up next, running for State House Seat 68.
From the heart of the city too busy to hate, a progressive voice making too much sense for corporate media's comfort. This is The Ron Show, where we the people come first. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
So we talked a good bit in the first hour about the Georgia state income tax and how Georgia Republicans, led by Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, who made this a central plank on his gubernatorial platform, it's eliminating the state income tax altogether. There's going to be some pushback in the House, however. John Burns is the House Speaker, and in a piece that sort of biographied him a little bit from Patricia Murphy at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, she writes, Burns laid out his priorities for the year in an interview at his farm ahead of the session. He said that staying focused on cost of living issues while keeping the state budget in the black will be his main objective. Good luck with that if they're going to try and eliminate the state. Anyway, he says something that impacts every family in Georgia is property tax reform. That's got a big affordability beside it. While the details haven't been announced, increasing the homestead exemption is one idea that's been floated, Patricia Murphy notes. Here's the thing. Cutting property taxes, let me read the next line. Cutting property taxes put the House on a collision course with the state Senate, where Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones already has a plan to eliminate the state income tax altogether for most Georgians. Cutting both at the same time would be difficult for budget writers to accommodate. That is true. But here's the thing. When he says something that impacts every family in Georgia is property tax reform, he's wrong. It does not impact those who rent, unless landlords are going to be obligated. Are they going to have something legislatively held to their heads that forces them to pass that property tax savings on to renters? If not, then that line that he said, where he says something that impacts every family in Georgia is property tax reform, is incorrect. Anyway, I had a chance earlier today to speak with someone running for a House district seat. Seat 68, District 68, is up for grabs. House Representative Derek Jackson is running for governor. So Coach Q, Quentin Pullen, is running for that seat. Here's my conversation with him. So over the summer, participating in and speaking at a local 5051 event, I got to meet this dynamic, charismatic individual that I just sort of kind of did that mental bulletin board, put a pin in that. He'll come back. We'll talk to him again. Sure enough.
This call will be recorded.
Oh, are you going to record that too?
Yes.
Okay. I was like, that's not what he sounds like. Anyway, he's running for Georgia House District 68, and he does not sound like that guy who says this call is being recorded, but he is Coach Q, Quentin Pullen. Thanks for joining the Ron Show again today, man. It's been a while since we've talked. How have you been?
Man, I've been fantastic. About the business, man, being out there trying to help change our world for a better place, really.
Yeah. And it takes, listen, I hate to quote a Hillary Clinton book, but it does. It takes a village. It takes a lot of folks. There is, I use the analogy all the time, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. You can't swallow the whole thing all at once, right? And there's something to that analogy that I think sticks for those of us in Georgia or in a purplish state, because the elephant, of course, is the GOP mascot, and felling the elephant means one bite at a time versus, just trying to. It's a multi-pronged approach. As we saw with the results last night, it doesn't always work out. You're not always going to flip a ruby red district. Scott Sanders was not able to do that, despite the fact that I thought he was a pretty cool candidate and not one of those who comes in with all of these bona fides from having served in office or clerked for so-and-so. He was just a guy with some good ideas who sat on the sidelines and got tired of sitting on the sidelines and waiting as no one stepped forward. So he did. I thought he had an energetic campaign. It's good to have somebody on the ballot. And so he only got like 28% of the vote. But that 28%, again, special election, who knows what happens in special elections. You're going to have low turnout. But he likely engaged some people who are now going to vote later in November, who will vote in the primary, of course, before then, but later in November. Democrats need that, one bite at a time. Coach Q running for District 68. You've got, I think, a little bit of an easier path. I mean, you got to win a primary. There is a candidate, one announced candidate so far that I can see that's running against you. And this is State Representative Derek Jackson's seat. He's running for governor, so he is leaving that seat open for someone else to step in. It is a blue seat, but we can't take anything for granted.
Never take anything for granted. Never take anything. Now, the last time that a Republican ran for this district was back when Tish Negisi ran. And she proved exactly what you just said, that it's a heavily Democratic area. But, you know, times change, man, and interference happens, things like that. And so running for this, I'm taking nothing for granted. I'm preparing myself. I'm out talking to the community. I actually announced back in August that I was going to be running for the seat. And I started my campaigning then because I know that you have to have a strong ground game in order for you to, one, get noticed, and two, get your message out there. And the last part is to actually build a team to help you.
Mm-hmm. For sure. For sure.
Yes.
Well, and the other part is this is the rising tide lifting all boats scenario too. You guys are, you know, once you win the primary, say you win the primary, you guys have an easier path in the general election, obviously. But it's about padding the lead at this point, because padding the lead in a district like yours means up the ballot. A John Ossoff running for Senate can do better because you'll bring voters to the polls who may not otherwise have been engaged to do so. So I know that you being, again, he's Coach Q, y'all. He knows about teamwork making the dream work. He knows about, you know, blockers on the line who don't get the notoriety. They're not Heisman Trophy candidates. They're blocking for the Heisman Trophy candidates, but it's all about that team effort to make that sort of thing work.
Yes. And that's what I just put my videographer sent this to me, and it was me explaining to people the climate that we're in right now, and how disenfranchised people have become with our electoral system, with government in itself in its entirety. And so I says, what we need right now is a coach, someone that can give us that confidence, someone who can motivate us to get involved again in politics. Because listen, everything that we do is politics. No matter if you go into the grocery store, the taxes that you pay, the prices that you pay in the grocery store, everything is politics. Your kids going to school, going to what school, going to good schools, even the work that you do on your job, everything is politics. So if you are of that mindset that, oh, politics is not for me, well, politics is about you. And so you should get involved and have some kind of decision making in where your tax dollars goes and how you want to see your life be, right?
Yeah. I want to, since you served in the military, there are a couple of realms that I'd like you to weigh in on. These aren't necessarily state-centric issues, but I wanted to get your thoughts on these anyway, because, well, first of all, I value you as a human being. And I don't necessarily just ingratiate that sort of compliment on anybody that comes on the show. Like, not all Democrats are the type of Democrats that I'm going to say, oh, you know, I think you're, but I value you as a human being because I think you have this aura, this vibe, this holistic energy about you that I think, first of all, is lacking in the state house, is lacking in politics, period. And I just kind of wanted to let you weigh in a little bit, if you will, on a couple of fronts. First of all, you served in the Marine Corps. The vice president as well served in the Marine Corps. The vice president was at a Talking Point USA summit here a few weeks back in December and went on this white nationalist screed, I'd say, where he breathed a deep sigh of relief for the entire venue and said, oh, we don't have to apologize for being white anymore. Someone who served in the Marines, such as yourself, you know the diversity of the Corps. You know the diversity of our armed services, our military.
Yes, sir.
Can you speak to what it was like to hear that as someone who also served in the Marines, who also knows the diversity that the vice president was surrounded by while in service, and to hear those words still come out of his mouth?
Yes. And I just had this conversation yesterday. I was in Atlanta at one of the labor union meetings, and I sat next to a veteran that was 80 years old. And we had this conversation about, first off, I didn't know that you ever had to apologize for being white.
I'm white and I didn't. I mean, I didn't get the memo.
It's like, wow, that's news, right? We should.
I know the mail. I know the mail's a little slow, but maybe it's stuck in process somewhere down in Union City.
Exactly. But the conversation we were having was this: the day that we stepped off the bus from going into boot camp, the drill instructor said one thing that resonated, that every single person that serves hears, and that is this: we don't see black, we don't see brown, we don't see white, we don't see, what we see is green, right? The person next to you is going to be painted in camouflage. This is the person that might save your life.
Yeah.
So whatever habits, whatever way you grew up, we're here to change that.
Yeah.
And so if I ever hear you distinguishing somebody by race or anything, then you're going to do push-ups, right? And
yes.
so that we all that served understood that, because if you go into battle with those ideas that, hey, this is not my brother and he can be killed, listen, you can get your whole platoon killed for that kind of racist rhetoric. And so to hear the vice president of this country, who's also a Marine Corps veteran, dig that out just because he wanted to pander to a certain demographic in America who's shrinking. And this is why I believe that they are very vocal right now, because they're shrinking, because our country is the most diverse it's ever been in history. And with that diversity, some people feel less relevant, and I'm just going to say that. I mean,
I think you're absolutely right about that. I spoke yesterday with Andrew DeCourt, who is a professor and author, and we talked about white fragility and white nationalism and the loneliness aspect, the isolationism that is felt among young white males in this country. It's no to me, it's no accident that sort of mindset exists, and I think we're seeing the bubbling over, the repercussions of it. Obviously, young white males are usually the fingers behind the triggers of mass shootings. We saw that Charlie Kirk was felled by a young white male who grew up in MAGA culture, surrounded by guns. A young white male grew up in a MAGA household, took his shot at the former and now again president during the campaign as well. We're seeing this all play out, and yet at the same time, on the right, there is this push to perpetuate that isolationism, that to present an otherism and to tell people that they don't need to go away to college and become air quotes radicalized by diversity, to stay out of the cities because the cities are bad places, home of diversity and anti-Islam, anti-black, anti-LGBTQI plus. Like, I think that's all by design, but it's literally killing people.
Well, but here you touched on something. It's a wonder why the largest demographic that supports those things are not educated. They're not college graduates. They're not doctorates. They are people who have these ideals and these beliefs, and you cannot crack their beliefs because they've been passed down from their great-grandparents, their great-great-grandparents, and it's been passed all the way down to them because they feel like this country was theirs, but it was never theirs, right? They took it, and then they said, okay, we're going to bring people over here that they thought were less than. And so now that those people who they thought were less than, they feel like, hey, I got to do something to fight back. And so they're trying to roll us back to a time when when they were superior,
Yeah.
And not that they were superior in the possibility of being great, when they were superior by violence, by killing, by torture, those types of things. And so we have to look at what the underlying things are. And my absolute hope and belief is that we have people in this country who are better than that, who when they get pushed to their limits, and man, I don't know where their limits are going to be, but when they get pushed to that limit, they're going to show up and demand, by force if it may be, that the government changes, And so right now, you asked me why I'm running for office, and I'm running for office because I understand that not just my vote counts, my activity counts, what I'm willing to put myself out there on the line for. And this came from my military service. I put my life on the line for our country because I believe in what we have here in America. I believe in fighting for that. And this is why I've been on the front lines with the protest movements This is why I'm choosing to stand up in my community and be the leader, because, we need leaders. We need people who are willing to not just want a title, that actually want to fight.
Yeah. We're on with Coach Q, Quentin Pullen, running for the Democratic nomination first to win the Georgia House District seat 68 in the general election later this November. Let's dive into some of his policy platform positions. We'll do that when the Ron Show returns on Georgia Now Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. We're with Quentin Pullen. He's running for Georgia State House District 68, a seat that will be vacated. Derek Jackson, who serves in that role right now, running for governor. Let's get to the campaign itself. The 5 central planks of your platform. Some of these you could say could cross the ideological spectrum, that you should be able to find common ground with Republicans on. I want to start with number 3, help creating a path towards small business ownership in our community. This is something that I believe is a platform position that Democrats have not beaten the drum on hard enough. In the last 4 or 5 decades even, we have seen this efforts to allow for consolidation, for corporatization to take over Wall Street, to take over Main Street, and Main Streets have been shuttered across the country in towns and cities that are not unlike the ones in your district.
Absolutely.
And I think in some respects, Democrats may have lost a lot of working class voters, because some of that working class aren't just the folks showing up to work in factories, but they're the folks who want to own a small business or run a small business. And it's hard to start a business in this country. And there are impediments to it. And a lot of those impediments were put forth by pro-corporate politicians on the other side of the aisle. So it's time for a party to say, you know what, we're going to be the party of small business. So I'm encouraged to see that you're running with that as one of your policy positions. Would you like to elaborate?
Yeah, well, let me just start off by saying I am a small business owner. Yeah. I've been in business for myself for a little bit above 30 years now. And it's when I moved back here to Georgia, I came back here with zero, really. My small business was severely affected by COVID. In California, they shut down fitness centers, and I'm a wellness coach, and we have a wellness facility here in Fayette. But I was able to, because of my work ethic, to get here and start with one client and then build from there, and then purchase this place, our facility, and continue to build the business. And I did it because, and I will say this, I have not taken out a loan for my business. What I did was I understood that as a business owner, you have to be willing to invest in yourself. The other thing you have to do is be willing to educate yourself in the resources that are available to you. And the part that Democrats are failing in is connecting with organizations in the community to get that resource sharing. Because let me just say this. If you are for these major corporations are not for small business. They are not. So you have to, and small business in this country has been the backbone of how we grew, and so to see a flip where almost no political party is for small business. Now, the GOP will say we're for business, but they don't distinguish we're for small business. So, a small business owner has to understand that everything that is going on with their business starts at a community level, because your business is in these smaller communities. And if you intend to grow, you have to make these community connections. You have to be on the Chamber of Commerce and things like that, so that you can network well and grow your business. It's a cyclical thing with business. I say to people that my business is it's a luxury business. I'm the first thing that people cut out when the economy starts to get bad. Yeah. And so I have to figure out ways to stay strategic in branching out to different aspects of wellness and keep my business going. And so there are resources in Georgia where we can actually go to these nonprofits that deal with small businesses and get them involved at the community level. Our representatives should be out there telling people what is available to these small businesses. And I will tell you this, I had a conversation yesterday with a representative, and what she told me was that Georgia Power actually has some grants for small business available, but how many representatives are out there telling their constituents that those are available? So listen, I'm going to be, as an elected official, in the community, talking to the community, at the chamber, at these businesses, finding out what the community wants, because I can't step in there and say, hey, I'm going to give you this when I don't know what you need. I don't know what you want. And so I plan to be that person that's a source, a resource that for small business in our community.
I saw an op-ed written by a former Jasper County Republican who I believe actually even interviewed you for a piece in a Fayetteville newspaper. He wrote in the op-ed that it's long past time, and I don't disagree, for Georgia to look at increasing the minimum wage. I definitely want to talk with you about that. Also, that being one of the top issues on your campaign website as far as platform positions and planks going, but also healthcare for all. We definitely need to discuss that as a state. As adults, can we get some Republicans on board as well? We're on with Coach Q, Quentin Pullen. He is running for the soon-to-be vacant House seat in District 68. Derek Jackson's running for governor, so that seat's up for grabs. We'll do that when the Ron Show returns on Georgia Now, Progressive Voices via TuneIn.
Broadcasting 5 days a week to make common sense common again. This is The Ron Show.
We're with Quentin Pullen. He's running for the State House District 68 seat that's going to be vacated by State Representative Derek Jackson, running for governor. Another of the platform positions that you list on your site, which is Q, the letter Q, the number 4, thepeople.com. Q4thepeople.com.
Yes, sir.
The top two. Now, these are progressive positions. Healthcare, a human right. To me, another one of those things that I don't think the entire Democratic Party has been vocal enough about. I think some of them are timid at the federal level and at the state level. Here in Georgia, infamously, we have yet to embrace Medicaid expansion. And obviously, the Affordable Care Act under attack. It's gotten to be where subsidized plans became vastly more expensive just in the last few weeks. And you also mentioned anyone who works for a job should earn a livable wage. You know, it's funny. I was reading an op-ed from Jack Bernard, a former Jasper County Republican, who I guess now he's as progressive as they come with everything that I read that he's written. and I think he did a piece on you last fall as well. But
yes,
there is. It's time to start having a conversation about healthcare that. I don't think Democrats have said this enough. I mean, we're so beholden to the Affordable Care Act because it's colloquially called Obamacare, and still want to champion it. And I'm not saying we ditch it, but I'm saying we mentioned that it was a step, but it wasn't the final step, and it's time to start moving forward. And then with the minimum wage, it's been a long time since we've addressed the minimum wage. Again, back to the Obama administration, and it's not enough. Obviously, in 2025, it's not enough.
Right. Listen, I'm going to give you the connector between the two of those, the top two. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Everything is politics, right? Everything also is economics. If you pay people a living wage, and I don't like the term minimum wage because, you know, if a person is excellent at what they do, why should you even think about something minimalist, right? The minimum that I can pay you to keep you around.
Well, I also don't like the idea of there being a floor in such a scenario where folks are taken advantage of. You know, folks with limited skill abilities for whatever reason that are usually not of their own decision. Folks who may be mentally or intellectually challenged, I should say. I just don't feel like we should be taking advantage of them in such a way that they're, sentenced to a lifetime of poverty through no fault of their own, and because this is what our economic circumstance in this country allows. It allows for there to be, that floor wage. That I don't know. To me, this is a question of morality.
Yeah, and people like to say, "Oh, entry-level jobs," right?
Sure.
Well, the only reason that I go get a job is because I need to live.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
And so
time has value whether you're working or not. There is value to anyone's
yes,
time.
Time has value. And I think if I'm going to go out and work for you, and I'll say this because one of my first jobs was I worked at McDonald's, you know, as a teenager, and you know, the CEO billions and millions of dollars, you know, and so are you going to tell me that the people that have put you in that position that help you continue to have that salary don't deserve to live comfortably as well?
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't matter the job that you have. When you leave your house to go out to work, it's so that you can afford your life,
mm-hmm.
And so that you can survive. And so I believe a living wage takes into consideration what is the rent in my area, or what does it cost to buy a house in my area? What does it cost to have a car and insurance and medical insurance? Because if you're paying a person a living wage, then they can afford all those things. And the other thing that they can afford is to not have to have 2 or 3 jobs, and they can spend time at home with their kids. And so all this stuff is tied into economics. And if we make people more economically sound, we're going to reduce crime. More people will be able to afford their health care, and you know, more people will be able to spend time cultivating their community to make it a safer, nicer place. And so that's why I say that everything is tied to economics. But what big business does is they try to make their profit sharing, their shareholders happy and make them more and more money. I really don't believe that there should be a thing as such as a billionaire. You know, I think that billionaires are excessive, and Georgia, you know, we like to talk about this being Christians saying the Bible better and things like that. It talks specifically about greed, man. Being a billionaire, that's 1,000 million.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And so you sit there and you go, in my lifetime, I'm not going to spend 1,000 million.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so if we kept what people, you know, at those top levels, and I'm not saying that they don't, hey, is 100 million enough? Is a 500 million enough? It should be enough for you to live comfortably, because if you're still contributing to society, you're going to make that over and over again. But the thing is let it go down to your employees. Let it go down to helping their lives be better, because you sit behind a gate, you got private security, you got police officers that you're contributing to their foundations so that they keep these people in line so that they don't get to where you are.
Right.
So
yeah.
I believe truly, if we invest in our people, this is America. This is the richest country in the world. If we invest in our people, we're going to see less crime. We're going to see more upward mobility.
Yeah.
And that's what we want. That's the American dream. You know, it's not stealing people from other countries and locking people up because of the color of their skin.
1,000%. I mean, I say this all the time. Crime exists where opportunity doesn't. And when we continue to starve portions of our country of opportunity, you're just asking for crime to be the alternative. I mean, you've got to put food on the table one way or the other. And if folks
absolutely.
are working and can't make enough to do that and thrive, or at least just survive in this economy, then I mean, what are we doing this for? That's the crazy part for me. And I'm not one that subscribes to the theory of, you know, jack the minimum wage up and let the businesses suffer the consequences. I mean, there's got to be some sort of a push-pull scenario where, like, say if the state of Georgia decides next legislative session, we're going to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. I mean, it's a pipe dream unless the Democrats take over the House and the Senate. But say that does happen. Then you also have to concoct some sort of narrative where, like, listen, that's going to be painful for some of you business folks who are still paying $7.25 an hour. So fine, we need to come up with some sort of a tax offset so that the pain is felt slowly instead of immediately, so that you get a little bit, you get a bigger tax break for the first year, a little bit less until you're caught up. And then maybe, here's an idea, tie the thing to some measure of inflation so that the minimum wage doesn't lose value again.
Right. Really though, moving to $15 is going to hurt businesses that are making millions and billions of dollars?
No, but I would offer. Let's go back to the small business though. I would offer that there probably are some people who own like legitimate small businesses who might be paying somebody $10 an hour or 11 or 12. In a place like Rockmart, Georgia, or some small, Tyrone. There may be somebody who is paying somebody a little bit like that, who may be working 10, 15 hours a week, and they're going to be impacted by that. And I think that small business deserves the break so that they don't feel the heft of that increase right away. That it's just a slow draw to the point that they don't even notice it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Let me show you how. And this is why we say livable wage, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm getting paid a livable wage, I'm going to spend more money.
Oh, sure. I get the economic benefit of it.
That money that we're paying people to live better, they can actually spend that money in their community because, like you said, a rising tide raises all ships, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm paying everybody in their community at those small businesses, and so they can actually afford to pay a livable wage to their people. So all of this stuff, man, it really all boils down to what is considered to be a livable wage.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll break it down to you this way. The people that we send to Washington, D.C., the military members that we have across the country, each region of our country has a cost of living.
Oh, yeah, it varies.
To the pay, right?
Right.
So you look at that and you make that the barrier for what you decide is going to be your livable wage.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go by that, because I really don't believe that our representatives should be getting paid much more than what the median income of their state is or their community. And so, that livable wage, not minimum wage, that livable wage will be felt by everybody in business and in the medical fields, all those things that require or depend on economics. And like I said, everything does. All those things will be felt by a livable wage.
I get what you're saying. I don't want a small business person, like a legitimate small business person who may have like one or two part-time employees to have to shutter their business again because the minimum wage was jacked to 200% of what it is now. That's all I'm saying. And I get it. There are folks, who would say, well, you should have been paying somebody better all along. Yes, but if you're allowed by law to pay that minimum wage, then, I can finger wag at the business person, but they're just taking advantage of the situation again and taking advantage of the person as well. I get that. But to me, it's like some sort of tax benefit that sort of slowly withdraws the pain of that. To me, is just the smarter way to go about it. And
I do agree that, instead of paying like one of my biggest issue, man, is, these billion-dollar corporations coming into small communities and then getting tax breaks.
Mm-hmm.
And
the small businesses don't get those.
Yeah. Hey, hopefully we'll get into the conversation about data centers, man. But small business doesn't get that. Yeah. Small business don't get those types of tax breaks. And so you're absolutely right. There should be more incentive from our government towards small business so that they can have higher employees. But I will say this. My small business started because of the skill set that I have, and I still work my small business, until it grows to a point where I can actually afford employees. And at the point where I get to where I can afford employees, then, I'm making enough money to basically to live and then help, my commitment is saying that I can help them live. So if they're part-time, I get it, but it all boils down to, man, that you have to be willing to do the work, earn that income, and then if your business is going, reward the people that are working for you so that they don't struggle. A lot of people make lifetime commitments. When we were living in California, she was with the company for 17 and a half years, and she lost her job, and had to start over at zero. And so there are people who commit themselves for a lifetime to small business. And if they're not making enough money to have investments, 401ks, IRS and things like that, what are they going to be left with when it comes to retirement? And I mean, given the fact that they're trying to take away Social Security right now. So, things have to be looked at as far as fairness economically. And the people who set those precedents are elected officials. And so, it is good to sit around the table with people who are similar to you. And I say this, man, I don't appreciate the fact that a lot of our elected officials are bought by corporations. You should be beholden to the people who vote for you and the promise that you've made to your constituents, not the businesses that are coming there, not the corporations. And so, it's people get comfortable. And I think we're at a point right now where we see more people running for office because they're sick of it. Across the nation, we got new people popping up running for office, and it's because they're like, I've been sitting in this community, I've been doing my part to serve the community, and all I see is the elected officials that we are putting in place taking advantage of the system. And so we're tired of it. It's time for new leadership. And one of my slogans for my campaign is "I am change," and I definitely am. I've never held an elected office, but I've been on committees in my community, organizations, vice chairs, and things like that. And so I'm ready right now to go to that next step of leadership to make a difference for the community.
You name drop data centers, and I think that's specifically for your district. That's important because your district is full of small communities and exurban and southern suburban counties that are targets by data centers. And we have a public utility in Georgia Power and the Commission that has made it really easy for data centers to proliferate in areas just like your district. And communities eager to have an economic impact, I put that in air quotes, often, rubber stamp approve these sorts of projects, not aware or seemingly unaware that there is an impact felt on the consumer, the individual that lives near these data centers, that, we're going to pay a little bit extra when it comes to our utility costs, but also the water. I mean, there's like immense amounts of water that are necessary for these data centers to stay cooled and to stay operational, and that also has an impact on utility rates when it comes to paying your water bill and the availability of water in your community. Would you like to weigh in on that?
Oh, would I ever? 2 years ago in 24, I ran for county commissioner. And this is when the data center here in Fayette was just starting to be under construction. And I said then that, I asked about renewable energy. I cited a study from MIT that talked about the long-term effects of data centers and that the toxicity of the water, where they're going to dump this water. They talked about the fact that you can use renewable sources of energy instead of creating such a demand on the power grid. And so I asked, why weren't we considering using renewable alternative to not as a complement to the power sources that we use right now? And man, people jumped all over me in the government. They, the data center is going to be good for our community. And now fast forward here 2 more years, and we're finding out that the chips that are going in the data center, as soon as you finish with construction, you got to start all over again, replacing the chips. And those are resources that, where do you dispose of the chips that are toxic to our community, our environment? And so we are accelerating climate change by being stubborn when it comes to energy, renewable energy. We really should be investing in the education of renewable energies, in the installation of renewable energies. And I'm not saying that data centers are bad for business as far as the technological advances it offers us. But what I'm saying is anything that we do that has an environmental impact should be, the community should come first when it comes to those things. And so these companies should be held accountable to their part of their impact in our environment, the climate, those things that are affecting us right now.
We're on with Coach Q, Quentin Pullen, running for State House Seat 68. There is a primary. He does have at least one declared opponent. We'll reach out to her and make sure that she gets the opportunity to come on the show as well. Anyway, Ron Show returns with Coach Q in just a few. It's Georgia Now, Progressive Voices via TuneIn. Got a few more minutes with Quentin Pullen running for State House District 68. the current occupant of that seat. Derek Jackson's running for governor, so it's up for grabs. Primary first, general election after that. So, Coach Q, what are folks telling you while you're out there campaigning on the ground, going door to door?
The very first thing, healthcare. It's
human right.
I'm a wellness center healthcare provider. One of my degrees is in physical therapy, and so the clientele that I see, I'm a cash business, and a lot of people can't really afford. But I end up as a small business owner sometimes just, what can you pay me? Because I took a commitment to helping people get out of pain. So I want to get on a committee for healthcare to help introduce legislation that helps us better our healthcare. So that's my big thing right now. My wife was on the exchange to have her medical insurance. I'm a veteran, so I'm fortunate to have the VA medical at my disposal. But my wife's medical insurance doubled, and as a small business owner, we got to do better than that. And so healthcare is my number one thing. And I want to get on the committee for that and veterans health, because I realize how intertwined that experience in my life and my business will help the constituents in my area to get those things. The other thing that I would love to do is I'm a mentor in the schools down here, and I see the impact of our kids and how they're lacking on a lot of different things, man. It breaks my heart when I sit and talk to a mentee who doesn't have the parentals, where their parents are working so much that they don't really have the time to raise their kids. And so this is why they get in a mentoring program. So we have to do better by our kids. It's investment of time, investment of money, resources. Growing up, we had people that were there for us that we could go to and talk to. And a lot of these kids, they have each other to go to. Man, I saw what went on at Atlantic Station and the violence of our kids, because they don't have an outlet. They don't have mentoring. They don't have people that are helping them. And so that's another thing that I want to get on is youth development and education, so that I can help. It really does break my heart. And then the other part, man, is I'm a small business owner, so I have to make my voice heard by conversations that I'm having with people in the community, small business owners, of how we can help them better their lives, be mentors in the community to teach people what they do and inspire other kids to become small business owners and mentor them into fields that are going to help.
Well, and I think that goes back to a lot of the other things that you listed as your missions for the district. Healthcare, the human right, obviously. Working for a job, earning a livable wage. Moms and dads who don't need second and third jobs can be home mentoring their kids as well. Focusing on quality education for the kids helps mom and dads out by having that quality education available so that they don't have to hover over the homework as well, or are available to do so if they're making enough money to be home to do that. And the fifth thing that we really haven't even talked about, but obviously you would think you would find bipartisan support for focusing on veterans and senior services for sure.
Listen, our veterans, man, we served our country. We did what a lot of people won't do. And so, and that's put your life on the line. I have the saying when I go out and I'm talking to people, every single candidate that you listen to are going to give you those four basic things. We want you to have housing. We want you to have health care. We want safe schools. And we want you to earn a living wage, right? And so they're going to give you those same basic things, but
I would argue you're not going to hear that much from the right, honestly.
Well, they do say that we're going to give you schools, but their idea is to cut books from schools, right? And to put the Christian ideology in schools. And so they're still trying to change schools, and they lied about healthcare, saying that they were going to give you better healthcare. Yeah. They do rally and say we're the party of law and order, right? So they do talk about those safety things. So the job of the elector is to figure out which candidate they trust the most to get those things and fight for them. And so you'll see a lot of veterans right now, man. There's this big movement. I have to go to DC in a couple of weeks. There's a big movement with veterans who are running for office.
Good.
And we're running because of what we experienced, what we fought for, what our beliefs are in our country. And we want to make sure that we secure those freedoms and continue to move about freely and not under dictatorship.
Quentin Pullen running for State House District 68 on the ballot for the primary. First of all, we got to get through that in May, and then if he manages to get past that, then on the general election ballot in November. And I'm sure we'll be talking during the general election season then. Listen, man, I appreciate you giving me an abundance of time today. We covered a lot of topics, and I wish you the best of luck.
Yes, sir. Hey, I appreciate the time, man. I appreciate you having me on again. It's always good talking with you. And hey, keep fighting, man. We appreciate the work that you do. And I'm encouraged by these next steps that you're taking, that you're going to grow, man. So I'm putting that energy out there for you. The best to you, man. And we'll talk again soon.
All right. Best of luck to you on the campaign trail, sir. That'll do it for now. 11 p.m. tonight, Progressive Voices via TuneIn. The replay 8 to 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, and then back 4 to 6 p.m. on Georgia Now. Show notes at ronshowatl.com. Take care.